Nebraska's new quarterback may have just fixed the biggest problem with Dana Holgerson's offense. And this episode of the Big Ten Huddle presented by FanDuel, we're talking about Anthony Calandria becoming Nebraska's starting quarterback, as many knew he would, and is not interested simply because Nebraska has a new guy. Everybody knew he was probably coming, and everybody knew he was probably going to be the starter. What matters is what Calandria allows Dana Holgerson to do that Nebraska simply could not consistently do last year. And I'm not talking about scrambling. I'm not talking about any of that. I'm talking about finishing drives. And if Nebraska starts turning more of those long drives into touchdowns instead of wasted opportunities, I think the Cornhuskers become one of the sneakiest teams in the Big Ten, especially when FanDuel currently has Nebraska at plus 104 to go over on their 6.5 win total. I mean, we're talking 7 wins here. I'm starting to think that number might be very reachable, especially if Anthony Calandria is the dude that we think he can be. Now, full disclosure, I picked Nebraska to go 5-7 this season, but I also picked them to do that because I just wasn't sold on Calandria yet. But if he is solid in the red zone, that's what Nebraska needs. Nebraska scored on 85.5% of their chances in the red zone opportunities last season. At first glance, that doesn't sound terrible, but 85% is just kind of fine. Except they only ranked 45th nationally. And there's another problem with just looking at red zone scoring percentage. A field goal technically counts as exactly the same as a touchdown, and as you and I both know, it doesn't count the same on the scoreboard. Your offense gets points either way, but obviously on Saturday, there is a difference between 3 points and 7 points. Basic math. Welcome to the Big Ten Huddle math program here. I mean, that starts adding up real quickly if you do it more than once. And Nebraska has had enough close games to know that you have to finish drives in the red zone if you want to put away some of these teams. And that's why Calandria's skill set gets really, really interesting. At UNLV last year, the offense scored on 87.9% of its red zone trips. And that ranked 22nd nationally. But I'm actually less interested in that 2-point percentage improvement than how I am and how Calandria changed the math once Nebraska gets inside the 20. Because everything gets harder in the red zone. The field shrinks. Safeties don't have to worry about somebody running 50 yards behind them. Defenders get packed in closer. Passing windows get smaller. Running lanes can completely disappear faster than they did before. So if you're playing 11-on-11 football and your quarterback is basically removed from the running game, the defense has one less problem to solve. And that's where Calandria changes things. He's a legitimate threat with his legs. Seriously, go look at the teams who have the most touchdown percentage in college football. I guarantee you 9 out of the top 10 has a quarterback who has some type of mobility, escapability to him, and probably a few rushing touchdowns on the season. Because you can run QB draw, you can run zone read, you can have a designated quarterback run, you can run an RPO, scramble when everybody turns their back and man coverage. Those aren't gimmicks. Those are valid plays in college football that have done super well for teams for a long time now. Those are extra questions the defense has to answer in the part of the field where every inch matters. And that's why I think Nebraska's quarterback change has the potential to be bigger than people even realize. This isn't necessarily about Calandria throwing for 4,000 yards or anything like that. I don't think he is going to, nor do I think he needs to. It's about turning second and goal from the 7 into a completely different problem for the defense. Let's make this really, really simple, all right? Imagine you're the linebacker. Nebraska hands the ball off to the running back. You've got to fill the gap, except Calandria might have just pulled it. Now you're hesitating because maybe he keeps it. Maybe he keeps it and runs outside, except Nebraska can attack a quick pass after that same look too. So he fakes the handoff, he's going to the other side, but then he comes up with his arm and it looks like he's going to pass, and before you know it, you're in an RPO situation, you're a linebacker who just had to make 3 different decisions. You can't run full speed, you can't go at it super fast. Now the nickel has to make the decision, and suddenly one defender being wrong by a half second creates a touchdown for the offense. That's what quarterback mobility does for your team. It makes the defense play honest. It makes them hesitate. It does not make them be able to go downhill. And if they are downhill and aggressive, they pay for it. And for Nebraska, that's especially important because of who is calling the offense. And that is one Dana Holgerson. He now gets an entire offseason to build around the skill set. That's very different from trying to repair an offense in the middle of the season. That's very different than trying to run an offense with Dylan Raiola, who basically had zero mobility to him. Last year was messy. There was offensive line issues. There was quarterback uncertainty. Holgerson took over play calling responsibilities during the season, and Dylan Raiola ultimately wasn't the same kind of runner that Calandria was. That isn't an insult to Raiola. I could insult Raiola some other ways if I wanted to, but I'm not going to. Different quarterbacks create different offenses. Raiola was much more naturally a traditional pocket passer, but he wasn't even a great pocket passer because he struggled to have that first step in the pocket to get away from pressure. Calandria is different. He gives Holgerson another level to pull, and I expect him to pull it a lot. Now, here's where this starts affecting Nebraska's win total. Look at the beginning of the schedule. Nebraska opens with Ohio, then Bowling Green, and then North Dakota. It's a real Indiana strategy here, right? Get going early on. And then when you get into Big Ten play, it's pretty favorable there too. You get Michigan State and you get Maryland. You can argue about individual games if you want. Maybe one of those games is better, than expected come the time of it. Maybe Nebraska has an ugly Saturday. I mean, college football happens, let's be honest. But Nebraska has a very realistic path at starting 5-0. And that changes the entire conversation around this team. Now, I know 5-0 is not necessarily something Nebraska fans would be super excited by because they've seen, kind of a tail off at the end of the season. All right, so I'm not trying to get you too excited, but it does matter for a team's confidence and ability to play if Matt Rule can get them going right. Because if Nebraska walks into the Indiana game at 5-0, you only need 2 more wins to get over the 6.5 win total. 2. Now, the back half gets substantially harder. Right? Indiana, Oregon, Washington, Ohio State, Iowa. This is not last year's schedule. This is much more difficult. There are real challengers here. This isn't me looking at Nebraska's schedule and predicting 10 wins because I'm not doing that. But 7? That's why the plus 104 is catching my attention here on FanDuel. Because Nebraska doesn't necessarily have to become a playoff team for the over to hit. They just need to stop wasting winnable opportunities. And that does, yes, come at the end of games and close games. But you know what helps at the end of close games? Converting in the red zone. Listen, how many times have we watched Nebraska over the years and thought, well, they're not terrible. They're just not finishing. Or maybe they have this one detriment and they just can't get around this one thing. I mean, they move the ball, they hang around, and they make, for the most part, they hang around. They make plays to convince you they're about to turn a quarter. And then the game gets tight. One drive stalls, one field goal replaces a touchdown, and you're in a one-possession game that can get wasted. It's been well documented that Nebraska has not exactly been great in late game situations when the score is close. And suddenly you're talking about another one-score loss. Changing that doesn't require Nebraska to become Ohio State. It doesn't require the most talented roster in the conference. Sometimes improving 6 wins to 8 is about just being better in the situational areas that decide close games. We're talking third down. We're talking turnovers. We're talking, late game execution. If we're being honest, Matt Rule has done a good job of correcting these issues year over year. If there is one thing you cannot say about Matt Rule is that he does not ignore issues. Maybe sometimes to a detriment, but he's not going to ignore issues. And I think the issue he's not ignoring this season is the red zone touchdowns. That's why Calandria intrigues me so much. Quarterback mobility can create answers when the original play isn't perfect. In college football offenses, they need that, especially teams that aren't going to overwhelm every opponent with 5-star talent. So when Ohio State gets to the 5-yard line, Jeremiah Smith might simply just be able to beat anybody out there. I mean, almost guaranteed he's going to be able to beat just about anybody out there. When Oregon gets there, maybe the offensive line just caves the front end and they're able to run Jordan Davison in there. Nebraska needs ways to manufacture advantages, and Calandria gives them one. But there's a flip side to this too, because running your quarterback creates risk. Nebraska cannot build an entire offseason around Calandria taking 18 hits every Saturday. There has to be more balance there. The offensive line still has to improve. The running backs still have to produce. The receivers still have to create separation. And Colandrea still has to prove he can consistently make Big Ten throws against better defenses than what he saw regularly at UNLV. Excuse me. That's the part we can't skip. Look, Indiana is not North Dakota. Oregon is not Bowling Green. Ohio State is certainly not Ohio. Spoiler alert. I know. I'm going real deep stuff here, right? But when Nebraska gets into the teeth of their schedule, defensive coordinators are going to make Calandria prove he can beat them from the pocket too. And that's actually why the first 5 games matter so much. Nebraska has an opportunity to build the offense gradually. Use the quarterback run game. Right. Build confidence. Right. Figure out which concepts Calandria handles best. Find the offensive line combinations that work. Develop chemistry. This is why an easy out-of-conference schedule can be so beneficial for teams, because you can work on execution and have kind of like a glorified practice out there. And I think we're going to see some more of that from Nebraska this season. Then when the level of competition jumps, Holgerson hopefully knows exactly what his offense does well. And that's a much better situation to be in than discovering your identity against Indiana because you just killed every team by 70 points, right? And there's one more reason I'm intrigued by this. Nebraska doesn't need Calandria to be a superstar or dramatically change the season or anything like that. That's a trap people fall into with the quarterback conversations, especially when people get excited about the quarterback. Either the guy's a future first-round pick or nobody cares. No, we certainly care. If Calandria simply makes Nebraska more efficient in high-leverage situations, that could be worth a win by 2 or a win or 2 by itself. Imagine essentially the same overall quality of team, but one more red zone touchdown against Michigan State, one more third down scramble against Maryland, one drive that stays alive against Iowa. That's how 6 wins becomes 7. That's how 7 becomes 8. And once you get there, suddenly we're talking about Nebraska desperately trying to not just desperately trying to reach a bowl game, but trying to get into one of the better bowl games. And Nebraska fans are laughing at me and Zach in the face because we had them at 5-7 in our preseason standings, which I would love. I would love to be wrong about Nebraska. We're talking about progress here. And that's why I think the headline here is bigger than just Anthony Calandria winning the starting job or anything like that. That part was, quite honestly predictable. The interesting question is whether Nebraska finally found a quarterback whose strengths specifically attack one of the offense's biggest weaknesses. Inside the 20, defenses now have another whole angle of a player to account for. Dana Holgerson has more options. The playbook can expand, and Nebraska has an early schedule that gives this offense time to figure everything out before the difficulty completely spikes. Does that mean Nebraska is suddenly winning the Big Ten? No. I have put too much trust in Nebraska in the past to, just outright predict something like that. But could they get 7 wins? Could they get 8 wins? That doesn't sound crazy to me. In fact, if Nebraska really does start 5-0, and this red zone offense clearly has taken a jump, I think it can take, we'll probably look back later in the season and wonder why the bar was only 6.5. The quarterback change isn't exciting because Nebraska has a new name behind center. It's exciting because Calandria may give Dana Holgerson exactly the tool he needs to turn Nebraska's empty opportunities into touchdowns. And for a team trying so desperately to turn close losses into actual wins, this could legitimately change everything. So give me your Nebraska prediction, over or under the 6.5 wins, in the comment section below. Would love to hear from you. Drop it in the comments and like the video as well. Subscribe for more Big Ten football and basketball analysis. And we're going to be putting out Nebraska videos at least once or twice a week. This fan base has done a great job responding to the videos we put out. So we love to do videos about Nebraska, Indiana, UCLA, USC, Oregon, Rutgers. I mean, there's tons of teams out there that we love to do videos about. Ohio State has been good to us as well, so you'll continue to see stuff like that, as well as the other random Big Ten topics and things like that we like to get into as well. So thank you so much for joining us on this episode of the Big Ten Huddle. Appreciate it. Have a good one. We'll see you next time.